I'm Britton LaRue, and this is Moon to Moon. Moon to Moon is a space to consider, celebrate, and share the ways we come home to ourselves, anchor through change, and uncover our power. 1 month, one phase, one loving step at a time. Dear Moon to Moon, it's Britton, and I'm so excited to share this delicious, this ridiculously yummy conversation with Daje Aloh of the Story Doula. It's so rich, and I can't wait for you to get to it. I'm going to keep this introduction short. First, I want to share a few updates. Then I'm going to get into Daje's bio, and then we're just going to hop on in, and then I'll see you on the other side. So I just wanted to share that I only recorded 2 days ago for my birthday episode, The Audacity to Shine, a solar return episode. And I'm now on the other side of some really potent events. As most of you know, my book was released yesterday and began arriving into your hands, into the hands of humans I know and humans I've never met before, whose names I don't know. It's a wild experience. Given especially that I've had my advance copies for months, and the final touches on the manuscript were completed last spring. So to me, it's just wild that it's only now that everyone's getting this. But here it is, under a Capricorn moon, my natal moon. And then yesterday, I'm not even kidding you, was the day that Chris Brennan of the Astrology Podcast set to interview me, coinciding with my pub date, like accidentally. We met at the moment the moon was exactly on my moon, and we ended up talking for over 5 hours. Like the final cut will probably be in the 4s, but like that is a really long time. At the beginning, he said it would probably be 2 hours, but once we got in and then we took the first break, he was like, are you okay with us going slow? Because I think that this is going to be one of the legendary episodes of the Astrology Podcast. I'm not even kidding you. And it was like, yes, Chris, I don't mind at all. I can go as long as you need. Like, my body will go as long as it needs to go for this. And it was so fun, and it was so wondrous experiencing myself just like taking the mic, just like, you're handing me a mic, Chris, and I'm going to take it. Thank you. Like the audacity to fucking shine. The funniest thing is that he said 1 o'clock his time, which is mountain. And no kidding, Mercury and Pisces, I put it in my planner as 3 p.m. There's only 1 hour difference between mountain and central. So like 15 minutes before we were set to hop on, I get an email from him like, I'm, see you in a few minutes. And it was like, wait, what? So I had to throw my clothes on, get my lipstick on, hook up my mics, like forget all the extra, reviewing of things that I thought I was going to do. Like, no, we're not reviewing things. Like, You know this. You don't need to review it, B. Just click on the Zoom link and take the mic. Truly wild. I didn't even realize until we got off that I was starving. Because it was after 7 my time, 7 p.m. when we finished. And it was like, oh my gosh, I am so hungry. I am so thirsty. Like, my Capricorn moon did what it needed to do to just keep me like completely in this focus. And then I closed everything up, threw my shoes on, jumped in the car, and met my brother who's in town from California, my mom and Matt for a celebratory dinner to celebrate the book coming out. I mean, what a wild day. I mean, what a magical thing that the election for the release date coincided with his election for when he wants to talk to me, neither of which were in my control at all. It happened to coincide right with my moon. Like, magic is real. I couldn't have dreamed something like that up. It's only a out of my hands, the magic is beyond me kind of thing that would happen. So I'm just like, what? So excited. I hope everyone tunes in. It's so incredible that I got to be able to just speak on Shaming the Signs for 4+ hours straight, moving through each sign so that there's this like compendium, and we only did a fraction of the notes that I shared with him. So amazing. So, as you heard on Monday, or maybe you've seen in Instagram, I don't think I'm going to have time today for a newsletter. We'll just see what happens. I got my brother in town, we're going to go see Dune 2. But I'm doing this free talk tomorrow at 11:11 my time, The Audacity to Shine. It's going to be all about this energy of just letting yourself be in that throne of your spirit, of your light, of your shine, of your magnetism, of your presence, of your radiance, just sitting fully inside of it and just letting it ooze out of you. And I'm going to share just what's really emergent for me right now on this topic as I'm experiencing myself in very new ways for me. And it's an ephemeral happening. I'm doing this as a new thing, a new experience. So you'll only have until noon on Friday, my time, Central, to watch the replay. It will not be downloadable. So we have over 100 people signed up. I'm so excited that everyone's energized by this. I don't have any time to create promo around it. You either get it or you don't. Come on in, see what I have to say. And so I'll put a link for that if you haven't joined yet. You don't have to be there live. The replay will come up about 15 minutes after the live ends, and then you can watch it all at once on your own time, or take it in pieces until it's gone, until we pull it down. And then the other thing that I wanted to share is that Daje, I just saw, has a workshop this Saturday. So you're about to hear from Daje Aloh. You're going to be floored. You're going to be amazed. And we're talking about Daje's mandala. We joke that neither of us is totally sure how to say it, for the creative rites, which we're going to define and we're going to talk all about. Daje is doing a workshop this Saturday, March 9th. It's at, I think it's 10 a.m. Pacific. It's 90 minutes and it's $22. So if you're resonating with Daje's voice and you receive this in time, please hop on over. I'm going to have the link so that you can get everything that you need if you want to join Daje there. And then I'm going to share with you all the links that you may want to have so that you can get connected with Daje and follow her work and get involved with the really cool things she's doing with the story Doula. Let me share Daje's bio. Daje Aloh is a writer, facilitator, and vision midwife and mentor for wild-hearted threshold keepers, seers, and creative entrepreneurs who are intent on shifting culture through their creations. Her offerings weave the wisdom of Earth and her cycles, the wisdom of the stars and their rhythms, with the practical magic of narrative design for the sake of regenerating culture at the personal, virtual, and cultural levels. Learn more at thestorydoula.co. I am such a huge, huge, huge fan of Daje's. I love Daje's Instagram. It is so nourishing. There's so much there. Daje is a fountain of wisdom. And I had been itching to get to know Daje, to get closer to Daje in some way. And we'd both been sharing each other's work and each other's stories. Like, we clearly have this resonance. And then one day I saw Daje share this Creative Rites Mandala. And I was like, what is that? I need to know what this is. This looks like how I think about the zodiac. What's happening? And so we started connecting in my DMs, in our DMs. And then it was like, can you come on Moon to Moon so we can talk about this? Because I really want to talk about this. So it's just a really, really, really exciting, creative, generative, playful, loving conversation. And we talk about Daje's chart a little bit. Daje's Libra rising with a Gemini sun and an Aquarius moon. So big air. You can feel it. It's so joyous to witness, to receive, to listen to and experience Daje's voice as it moves through your field. So I'm so, so excited to get you there. Here is my conversation with the story doula, Daje Aloh. Welcome to Moon, Daje.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I just reached out, I guess, like a week ago or so. And so I appreciate you just like nimbly up for just getting together and talking. I've been thinking about your creative rights diagram, your mandala, since you posted it maybe a month ago. Just, it's like in my living awareness, and finally just decided to follow an impulse to see if you would hang out with me and we could talk about it. And thank you for saying yes to that. I love following you on Instagram.
Oh, same here. Thank you. Yeah.
I was trying to think about when I first connected to you. I feel like I've been following you maybe a year. I really and truly cannot remember if someone shared your work or if you shared something of mine, or do you have any memory?
I have no idea. I know that I came across your work around the same time, maybe a year ago. And
Okay.
really loved your Unshaming series. It was super great.
Thank you. It's been so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
To watch and read and all the things. So,
Thank you. I feel from your posts such a deep rooted, sincere connection to like the creative energy that moves through you.
mm,
Um, I feel such a zing every time I receive a post.
mm,
I love to move through the tiles and feel um the rhythm of moving from like point to point, it's from turn to turn. And it's like a whole experience
mm.
receiving your words. So just thank you for bringing that out.
Thank you for reading. It feels like I said, it's just a delight to be here and to share and to just kind of be on the other side of this exchange as well. Um, I feel like writers often are like surprised that people even like fully read and take in their work. And I've been writing on the internet since I was 12, and I'm still like, whoa, okay, thank you for reading. This was just in my brain. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I want to get into the creative rights today, but first, I feel like I personally would love to hear more about your story of how you came to be someone who writes these incredible posts and shares their words in the world. Um, I would love to know how you came into the name, the story doula.
Mhm.
And maybe just spending a little time sharing some of your background and how your name and your work is moving through you today can help set the space for the conversation after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just kind of a little bit about my background. I grew up in Tennessee,
Mhm.
in Memphis, and when I was in high school, which is kind of odd because I didn't actually go to high school, I was quote unquote homeschooled, which for us at the time, my brother and I and our family meant that we were uh, religiously unschooled. We had no curriculum in middle school and high school. I think I maybe have like a little bit of sixth grade in me. But that's about it. That's as far as my education went. But when I was in that period of my life and I was working at this nonprofit, I had this tutor who tutored me in math so that I could pass the standardized test to get into college. And it was like this whole big secret project to get out of the cult, even though I wasn't calling it that at the time. But she was like really excited and adamant that I had the opportunity to go. I also had a piano teacher who was like kind of secretly trying to get me into college um, to study piano pedagogy. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go to UT to follow the love of my life, who is also my high school bully. So there's this like weaving of events where I somehow made it into the University of Tennessee by the skin of my teeth and on a wait list. And I had to I had to give my mother money to rent a car so that we could escape kind of in the middle of the night to do it. So I ended up in East Tennessee, uh, in this like strange series of events. And and yeah, just like it was just like this whole like unraveling and discovery of who I was outside of that paradigm. And I got married to my high school sweetheart, bully. And then we got divorced at some period. And we both just found our way into becoming artists in our own right. He's a painter now. He also manages restaurants. And now I'm like, on the internet doing who knows what. And that has been like the greatest gift of my life. It's been the greatest portal. It's been the greatest transformation. that I've gotten to meet over and over and over again in my early 20s, just learning how to be like a person and a woman, and like also reckoning with childhood and reckoning with what I didn't know. And so now, I guess over the last 5 years, I've been working for myself. I spent those early 20s working in marketing in the corporate and nonprofit context. I somehow ended up being a marketing director, and I really I hated it. And I really just wanted to tell stories. I really just wanted to, um, if I was going to do marketing, I really wanted to do it and support people in a way that allowed them to express their nature, to express their heart, to step into the poetry of who they are and what their work is, to breathe life into the world, and not just like sort of, support people in shipping products, but really support people to step into something that breathes back into the earth. And so when I was like going on 6 years ago, I think it's like my 6 year anniversary at this point, I started working for myself. And over the years, like that term, the story doula, just sort of came to me. And I believe it came from my guides, my ancestors, as an invitation, as an assignment, as a mythopoetic identity that I could work with and weave with and name my work with, that didn't feel as icky as I'm a marketer, or didn't feel like I had to find my way into the therapist route, which I didn't want to do, working with personal mythology, working with like stories, working with calling people into their essence. So the story doula just became a term that felt right for my work. It felt right for what was actually happening in the work. Um, and so, yeah, here I am. I'm just continuing to explore what that is and what that means for myself and my people.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. Did
Mhm.
you experience it first through um, one-on-one engagement, or more like teaching and group support?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. So it kind of started for me when I was at my last job, which was I was this director of marketing at a nonprofit that was centered around the relationship between theater, the arts, and activism. And it was a really beautiful organization, and the founders of the organization and the directors of the organization were just, classic storytellers, really profound in their craft. And in many ways, they took what I was already culminating through songwriting. I used to like perform poetry and songs and tour and that kind of thing. They took what I was culminating and supported me to see like the profound pathways for healing, culture, place-based healing, arts-based healing that could be utilized with the gift that I had. And so from Linda Pierce Bailey, who was my boss at the time, and from Jonathan, who was her assistant director, I learned circle work. And so those were the first kind of environments that I started to learn about personal mythology work, and working inside of like school environments, working with veterans, working with like, people who are transitioning out of prison, working just kind of in like the local community at the super local level with regular people doing regular things and being folks, and it's like, what is the power of story in this context, from the context of the land, from the context of people, from the context of culture? And so when I started branching off on my own, um, there's something that happens when we individuate from our teachers and we create space for ourselves to embody our own work, is sometimes there's this veil of forgetting that happens when we step into our own realm and we think, oh, well, that was that work there, and now this is my work now. And we're like, what is that now? So there's like kind of this like separation that takes place. But for me, it was like, is it okay to weave the thing that pays my bills with the thing that feeds my soul together. And what called me back into that work was my work with my clients, where people would call on me for brand strategy support. And the next thing you know, we're reweaving their entire personal mythology. We're reweaving their entire inner landscape about who they even believe that they are, like what they believe their voice even is. And so that just, it just kind of fueled me to sort of do the Gemini thing where you're just holding both paradigms, holding both realities, and just kind of going with it and weaving with it and seeing what wants to emerge. So a little bit of both, I would say, both the individual and the sort of circle work just kind of birth this thing that I'm doing.
Yes.
I don't even know. What is the story? I don't know what the story doula is, but it's something. It's weaving something. So there's that.
So did you then like bring it to Instagram and see like hey y'all, how do you receive this?
Yeah, well, so this is also another funny thing, because I mentioned earlier, I've been writing on the internet since I was 12. Had the original blog spot and tagged in MySpace accounts that all of us millennials probably possibly had in secret for me. But like it became sort of a natural transition for me because I've had an Instagram account since Instagram started. And I've always sort of been like too deep for words or whatever. I don't know, just like really dramatic and melodramatic, and just always writing really deep things on Instagram. When I think it was 2014, I started a blog called Free to Exhale, and I started sharing my blog pieces on there. And it's very much about the same stuff that I talk about now, except I didn't have the same language that I use now. And I didn't have like the same extra interests that have been added on top of that, like astrology and the archetypes and talking about myth the way that we talk about, like, it just wasn't there. But I was talking about all the same things, all the same seeds of transformation, all the same seeds of rest and honoring the body and creating space for the body to be itself. That was also woven into my music. So on Instagram, I would talk about it. Like I would talk about these same themes through the lens of my music. And I would say that music is probably the first place that story doula work came to be, because for me, songwriting wasn't just songwriting, it was a vehicle for culmination, the culmination of spirit, the culmination of soul. And so, I would go into these venues and places, and like that also was story doula work. It felt like a gathering of sorts of ideas and stories that we don't always talk about or think about or feel into. There's permission in those rooms for us to feel and think and be with those things together. And then photography got woven in. So I used my Instagram to weave in my story work from my songwriting, my story work from my writing, and then my story work from photography. I had an ex-lover who the name of he had two projects. One of his projects was called Storyographers, and the other was called The Listening Lens. And so he flew me out to South Africa to work with him and walk, just kind of walk around and do personal mythology work in an emergent way with the lens. And he told me, you have a constitution for this. And he gave me this big fat camera, and he was like, we're going to do street photography. We're going to have conversations with people. We're going to do like festival photography, and we're going to engage that from the level of story and invoking the stories that long to be heard in people. So yeah, like I don't know if there was really a moment when I was just like, I'm going to start promoting my work on Instagram. it was just all it was just like kind of this soup that, like, I think there was the moment when I started working for myself full time, and I started a separate Instagram account for like my consulting and my marketing work. Um, but yeah, like, this has all kind of been a part of the same thread throughout history and throughout my life, and it's kind of been the same conversation the whole time, I feel, but in different formats. So
I'm going to get your chart up too, so it can be in the room with us
beautiful. I'm gonna
while
grab
we're
a sweater
talking,
while you do that.
please. I was realizing as you were talking that I long to have it like a three-way conversation.
Love this.
There we are. I don't know if you're used to whole sign systems, so if not, it might look a little different.
Oh, great. I usually use Placidus, but I love whole sign too. So I'm here for it all.
So, and I'm curious what your or how you came into astrology, and like, is it like a hobby? Have you studied it more formally? And
Mm, I have studied it formally. I studied with Virginia Rosenberg. But before that, the same ex that I was talking about who introduced me in a bigger way, in a more specific way to personal myth work, he was the first person who engaged my astrology, and he just like chat talk my astrology all the time. He was like, oh my God, you're a Gemini. Oh, you're an Aquarius moon. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I was just like, what does this mean? Like, why am I so horrible as a person because of my astrology? I need to know. I need to understand. And so it kind of sparked this, at first, very like cursory exploration of my astrology, very like sun sign astrology, pop astrology, kind of what does that mean? And I just rejected everything that I read. I was like, this is not me. I'm not like this. But then I just started going deeper, maybe about 4 years ago, into maybe even close to five. Like, what does it mean to have these archetypes living themselves out in my emanation, in my expression, in my chart? And my like deeper dives with astrology actually came through the portal of learning about my human design for the first time. And I decided, actually, I want to kind of get to know what my astrology is at the base level, and then integrate that with what I can understand about my human design. So it was kind of a winding journey.
I'm curious what you are in human design.
I'm a 2/4 emotional projector,
Mhm.
and my incarnation cross is the cross of rulership.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, I know a lot of listeners are multimodality, mixed bag of favorite mystical realms. So thank you. Yeah, I attract a lot of projectors in my community, and I have a emotional projector daughter too.
I
Yeah,
love
for you, is your moon in the Placidus chart in the fifth house of creativity, the way it is here?
It's actually in the fourth house in
The fourth
Placidus.
house.
Mhm.
Yeah. And is
Yeah.
your sun still in the ninth house?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay. And so it moves your Mercury then to the ninth as well, where
Oh,
I see it as 10th
Placidus.
house. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my Mercury is, yeah, it's like right at the edge of like the ninth house.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
then your chart ruler Venus, for me here, it's the eighth house. Is that what it is? Or is it seventh house in Placidus?
It's seventh house in
It's
Placidus,
seventh
which
house,
I
yeah.
like better. It's probably why I'm like, I prefer
I don't
Placidus.
know. You go so deep. As soon as I saw that, I was like, yeah, eighth house. She's hitting it. Yeah.
There's this like hopeless romantic in me that's like, I want a seventh house Venus, please. Thank you.
I always like to say both and for house
Yes.
systems, you know, like
Yeah.
there's just more than to play with when you have all those differentiations between house systems. I only
Absolutely.
have two tiny differences in between my house system, so I don't currently walk that like choice, you know, because it's basically the same.
Makes
But
sense.
yeah, so fun having your chart up then. You're
Yeah.
certainly living a Mercury next to the midheaven, you
Oh,
know,
totally.
right?
Totally. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
definitely.
so when I saw, I'm feeling like called now into another circle, your creative rights.
Mhm.
When I saw it, I was like, that is the way I feel about like the a picture of a diagram of like Wheel of the Year with the zodiac. And you wrote
Mhm.
back like, me too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh.
I will provide links in the show notes so that anyone listening can just immediately go right to it
Mhm.
while you're listening, listener. Um, but also we can just talk it out if you want to. Would you like to describe like if you were describing it to, let me pull it up. Do you see that?
Oh, I don't see it.
You know, I think what I have to do is stop share and then reshare. There we go.
Beautiful. Yes. Hello.
Yeah,
Oh.
so it's like the circle is it. I think I was thinking about it in advance, like how would I describe this to someone who can't look at it? This
Mhm.
is the way my brain works, that on the right hand of the circle is spring,
Mhm.
the bottom is summer,
Mhm.
left side of the circle is autumn, and the
Mhm.
top is winter. And I think just giving that, hopefully, listeners, that kind of like grounds you immediately into a picture so that we can live into that from there.
Mhm.
When did this so because then what else we're looking at is like these layers of circles, these concentric circles that go deeper and deeper and deeper into like the archetypal invitations of those seasons. So yeah, I would love for you to just take over because you're the creator sharer of this
Mhm.
beautiful mandala.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I want to just first name that so much of what I've learned has come from a weaving of other people who have poured into me, who have like gotten a lot of opportunity to just kind of geek out with and explore with and go deep with. And one of those people has been an old ex-lover, Teo Montoya, who is also a super brilliant human design analyst and someone who really sort of initiated me into this way of weaving with the four directions. Even though I'd been working with the seasons as a mandala creatively for a while before we actually even became friends, he really started his like kind of his work and his teaching really started to ignite in me the synthesis of all of these systems working together from astrology to human design to the four directions to the seasons um, and sort of weaving together for me what felt like this entire landscape to work with for mothering ourselves through the complexities of change and crossing the thresholds that make themselves known in our reality and also reteaching ourselves and our cultures and our people how to do that in a way that doesn't leave us fragmented, fried out from the deep realities of change. And so the creative rites as a mandala weaves together a synthesis of these systems. Some of them I learned also through Teo from Bill Plotkin, from the School of Lost Borders, and from multiple other people. And this is sort of my own take and expression of the system itself. that exists as a deep structure being sort of a meta template that holds all of reality, right? So like the circle is kind of a meta template that holds the structure of how we engage reality. This is a map of that meta template, one of many. And maps can be as unique as a fingerprint. We all have our own meta maps inside of us. And this is sort of one that I've created to support myself, but also to support my students and the people who walk with me in my field, to see creative process as an inevitable aspect of human development. And so when we're moving through life, when we're moving through change, what we're actually moving through, I believe, is a creative process. It's a global creative process. It's an ecological creative process, but it's also an individual, personal creative process. So when I see this, like when I work with this, we have the east. I always start with the east, the south, the west, and then the north. We have the spring, the summer, the autumn, and then the winter. Then we also have multiple archetypes that work within those realms. The spring being around, the summer being around, the autumn being around, the winter being around. We have multiple stages of development that work within those realms that overlap each other. We have infancy and early childhood in spring. We've got adolescence, young adulthood in summer. And we've got adulthood and middle passage in autumn and eldership, and then back into the fetus in winter. This also works with the astrological wheel, I feel, when you sort of mirror image the wheel, where the spring holds the archetypes of Aries and Taurus and Gemini, the summer holding Cancer and Leo, and Virgo, and so on and so forth, weaving sort of this, like, again, a meta pattern for which we can understand what is happening creatively, what are the emergent creative processes that are taking place within our beings as we express our emanation out into culture. What are the creative processes that are taking place as a result of the expression of our essence? Because we create an impact whether we want to, mean to, or not. And what is happening in the world around us, what is reorganizing when we step into the room. I believe that these meta maps, like the creative rites, like the astrological wheel, like the four directions, support us in weaving together an understanding of what's happening, a myth, a construct for what's happening in culture. So to use this as a mandala, which I believe a mandala is a construct that is kind of like an embroidered weaving of ideas, of prayers, of songs, of archetypes, of stories that creates that like sort of creates form. It like creates a vibration in culture. So like it's like a like kind of an enchantment that creates a vibration in culture that manifests new realities. And so what happens when we weave these inevitable processes of life and death, change and initiation, and begin to do that consciously? We start to create consciously. We start to story consciously. There's a lot that can happen in that. And so the Creative Rites is just a map for what's happening in each stage of the process. How do we story that? How do we harness that? How do we innovate with that?
Yum. Thank you. I'm letting that land in my body. Listeners cannot see Daje, but your arms and hands are so alive as you're speaking. Like, I'm sure everyone can feel it because it's like turning the energy around in the space between us that we're sharing with everyone coming into contact with this. And I just love how it feels so much. Thank you. I actually looked up I have to admit, I'm a chronic mispronouncer, so I never know if it's mandala or mandala. And even if someone told me, I would probably forget.
I think there are multiple ways to say it at this point as language evolves, but
Yeah. I looked it up that like Manda is the root is essence and La is
Mm.
container. So it's like
Mm.
container of essence. And you're over here speaking of the essence. So so yummy.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I would love to dive in deeper with it, you know. When you like right, it's a circle, so where do you enter?
Mhm.
Part of me wondered if it would be resonant to begin in winter since we're in the very middle of winter as we're speaking
Mm.
right now between the solstice and the equinox in honoring your moon, the Aquarian moon. I wonder, how do you begin to offer this as a tool? Where do you enter? And if you did enter through the void, like does that resonate for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been taught that you can enter into any part of the wheel and it all works together. So I believe we could enter into the void.
Mhm.
I think we enter into in the place where we feel our most natal orientation.
Mhm.
And so if we were to weave astrology into this, I believe we all have um, an orientation in the wheel that is innate to us each. My orientation with my sun being um, in Gemini is very much in the spring in many ways. My moon's orientation is very much in the winter, right at the crux between eldership and the fetus. And so like right in the void where things dissolve and come back again is where my moon is. Um, and so I would say, look at your chart. Where do you feel or feel it into your body? Like where do you feel you're orienting from the
Mm.
most? Where is home for you inside of this wheel?
Yeah, that is yummy. You know, my sun's in Pisces and I'm Aries rising, so
Mm.
I myself really resonate with and my moon's in Capricorn. So I resonate with the dematerialization and rematerialization, or I guess in this case, regeneration,
Mhm.
as my zone. And I also feel that I'm always in different parts of the cycles at once and never
Mhm.
fully in one period. But that's what I love about it is the way the circle, the wheel can invite us to feel ourselves always in in a spiral.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Are you familiar with Lawrence Hillman's work? He's James Hillman's son.
No. Lawrence.
Lawrence, he's an astrologer, and he talks about this concept of the polypoetic psyche.
Ooh.
And I feel like it works really nicely with the system where we are in all aspects of the wheel at once. All of the planets are they're all us. They're all archetypes that exist in our being. And so we are polypoetic in nature. We're never just in one place, or no, we're never just housing one personality at a time. But that maybe sometimes there are aspects of our psyche that are taking center stage, that are taking up more presence than others. And that's just kind of the nature of, being able to express at all. But I love
Mhm.
that
I
concept.
love that phrasing. So, what I really want to talk about is the very center circle, is where you bring in stories.
Mhm.
With the stories we are for spring, the stories we become for summer, the stories we tell for autumn, and the stories you create for winter. I would just so love to hear you riff on um, each of these as they relate to any of the archetypes of those seasons. That is just such a beautiful invitation.
Mm. Yeah, well, starting in the spring, I would say that the stories that we are the stories of our context. And
Mm.
they're the stories of sort of the soil of our being, right? And they're the myths that we were born with, right? So we all are born into a context. We're all born into a construct of some kind, even if it lacks structure, right? So even if you were born into a family that wasn't particularly religious, there still is a bit of a construct around that non-religiosity, right? And so we're all born into these stories, and they become sort of like the material of who we think we are, right? Who
Mm.
we think our personality is and wants to express itself. And this is early childhood, that first, 0 to 7 years is where we get the sort of juice of our formations, our attachments begin to form. We start to make sense of the world and um, what we understand is real about the world and not real. Many children stop believing in Santa Claus when they're like 7, 8, 9 years old. Um, and there's just sort of this forming and shaping of what is the world in that time and who am I in the context of it. The spring is also this time where we learn wisdom truths in more like sort of subconscious ways, right? Like whether you go to church or you don't, you go to mosque or you don't, you go to school or you don't. And so as we transition into the summer, where we start to break away from these ideas of who we think we are, what we think the world is, the permanence of meaning, we start to, uh, what Carl Jung calls individuate. We start to individuate. We start to become a being of our own on our own terms, right? And so this is the adolescence to young adulthood stage. This is that like, you know 10 years old to like 25 years old kind of stage of the psyche, which we're all the stages at once, by the way. This is not a linear concept or process. Like you can be in an east stage and be freaking 64 years old, and just coming back around in that cyclical way into this story of this is who I am. But then when you start to individuate and change, and you start to recognize change, deep change for the first time, change of being, you start to realize the power of becoming something else, of deciding for yourself, this is who I'm going to be, right? And this is kind of living into that act of living into a new construct, living into a choice, living into a decision about your identity. And so when we transition into the West, we start to tell stories about that becoming, right? These are the stories we tell. That the West is also where the South is like this place of like becoming and recognizing our wild indigeneity to Earth herself. And this is the place of our inner child and our adolescence and the part of us that belongs or doesn't belong. The West is the part that tells about it, that shares, that poets, that songs, that weaves ideas into stories and outcomes or teachings. It's the area of the muse beloved. It's taking the culmination of all that we have learned from the West, from the East and the South, and giving it its final hurrah. I like to think of it as like how the leaves in the autumn when they're transitioning and they're becoming these brilliant colors. They're telling the story of the year that is past. They're telling the story of the bloom and the harvest in one final hurrah before the leaves fall to the ground to become something new. And so this is the area of the chart that is like, where we start to orate and we start to sing the song of our souls and to name the name of our souls. This is who I was. This is who I became. This is who I am. This is who we are. This is who we became. This is who I am. And so just like singing that song of who we are, so that as we move into the north and we feel the impact of those stories, those lived experiences that we begin to share, this becomes the shape of our eldership. This becomes the shape of our capacity to give, to take on a role. And so I like to think of the North as this area where we start to become that nurturing, generative adult, right? Who is able to really contribute to culture because of all that they've learned. Not because they know more than the other, but because they are compelled to bring their essence forward because of their radical sense of belonging, because of their naming, and their learning that they've gained through all the other aspects. And so this is the story that you create. This is the legacy. So you can kind of think of it like this wheel is like the life cycle of a seed blossoming into a flower and then becoming seed again as it withers into the winter. This is the seed that you put back into the soil to bloom and become the fetus that eventually may become an infant and then again a child and so on and so forth. So those stories come out of us and then they begin to create structures that live outside of our being, big systemic impacts. And when I say big systemic impacts, I'm not talking about political. I'm talking about that moment when you decided to step into your role. And Bill Plotkin, who is another person I've learned a lot from about this particular system and way of thinking about the world, he calls this your mythopoetic identity. I call this our mythocultural role, where you step into that place that only your soul can fill, and you bring something forward from that place, and it impacts people in ways that you can't know or measure. You can't fully understand how that seed proliferates and travels through the wind. It's kind of just a trust and believe that you planted the seed. You may not live to know the impact of that or how many souls it touched in its life cycles. And so that's what I mean by, and this is why this is sort of the archetype. I didn't talk about sort of the creative archetypes, the dreamer, the risk taker, the magician, the visionary, but this is how those archetypes really kind of take place in the world as nurturing a generative adults, as people who can envision and bring their medicine forward into through a mythocultural role that impacts people beyond our capacity to measure, beyond our imagining. And then those seeds take root into the soil again and become the fetus, become the imaginal, become the prophetic, become, those seeds of vision that become something that we can't measure. And so, yeah, that's kind of how the internal aspect of that wheel, I feel like, really unfolds. And there's probably so many other layers that if other people were to look at this, they would also have their own take, their own relationship with it, which I love. So yeah.
Yum. Thank you. Thank you. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious how this mandala.
It might be mandala because I'm from Tennessee. So just to name that one.
There you go.
My partner gets me all the time when I say tantra instead of tantra. So it just happens. It just happens that way.
Still. All pronunciations welcome. Yeah, I'm thinking about it as a tool, and I'm thinking about it for someone who's like, I'm so alive hearing about this. I'm so energized. How can I bring this into my life? Or like, where do I begin to let it catalyze my storytelling? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we always begin it as an invitation with orientation. Where am I in the context of it all? Right? So that even that question of where do I begin is part of the orientation. And part of what I feel like this mandala offers are they're like the practice of orientation. So I call this a rite of practice, because orientation is a rite of practice. So if we want to work with the wheel, first we have to understand or get to know how to tune into the compass that mirrors this wheel, right? What part of us is resonating with this tool that we find so interesting? What part of our compass can match, our internal compass can match and make sense of and mirror what's happening in the wheel? And then through the lens of our own compass, where can we make sense of where am I in the context of it? And I feel like from there's a lot of really powerful sensory, somatic information that becomes available. So it's kind of like, another rite of practice. I have 3 rite of practices that I teach in my programs. It's orientation, the listening walk, and oration. And it's kind of like when you're walking in a particular environment or climate, or you go to different places in the world, and your body just gets different information from every single land. Every place you go, the body starts to become a divining rod that perceives new information. And so this act of orienting allows us to get familiar or to name where we are, so then we can attune to the information that's available there, and then begin through that information receive instruction that can really only be for us in that moment at that time, directly from the earth, directly from the landscape of archetypes that is going to propel us forward into the next moment, right? So there's all kinds of ways to start, but my invitation for anyone working with a map or a mandala that has sort of these kinds of deep structure elements, whether you're just working with the seasons or the elements or astrologies, find out where you are in the context of that, orient to that place, and then just start listening, just getting quiet and inviting your body to open just enough to receive new information.
So rich. I love the word orientation so much. And I find it very supportive for bringing people into their charts, which is also a place that can feel overwhelming when you don't know where the door is, like what door first.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about how the year that I found my intuitive healing teacher, which led to the moon starting to talk to me, which led to a lunar practice, which led to me asking for a divorce, which led to all this hermitage time where I found astrology, started a tarot practice. My whole path. I remember I went to listen to a speaker who was talking about the idea is I was learning how to be someone who could talk about my dreams for this world more politically, like it was from an activism group. And she's like, the most important thing to begin with is to know your story. Start with your story. And then when they're engaged, they'll hear about this thing that you care about. And I felt so much despair that I had no idea what my story was. I was just like, my story? It was a huge turning point in that year because I was like, what does it mean to become a person who has a story to share, you know?
Yes.
I'm like 39 years old
Yeah.
at the time.
Wow.
And pretty quickly from initiating that question, like I began living into it and I started to have all kinds of stories to share. But I'm curious if this is something that you encounter, is the someone who is feeling like they don't have a story.
Yeah, well, what I encounter the most is mostly people who feel like their stories are boring or they don't matter.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what it was.
Yeah, it's like this idea that your story has to be this dramatic, traumatic, constant turning of events. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, to be very honest and fair. Like it's, like our stories are our mandala.
Mm.
They are the prayer and the spell, and they are the map. And when we can begin to appreciate the elements and the characters in our stories that have appeared so far as they are, we might even see glimpses of ancestral prayers for the lives that we are living right now playing out. So it's so interesting to me when people are like, I lived a pretty typical boring life, always had money, never had to worry about my bills not getting paid. This kind of like, that's great. Your story is somebody else's mandala that was woven from a prayer, a seed planted into the future. What do you want to do with that? What do you want to bloom? Listen, what do you want to bloom with that? What do you want to bloom with that prayer that was prayed for you, right? Or folks who are like, my story is too traumatic, too dramatic, too intense to be telling anybody at all. And I'm still like, that story is a mandala. It's a spell. It's a prayer woven for our futures. How is that story that you've lived igniting you into change, into difference, into individuation, into healing of your bloodline, and all of these things that are available from that? What do you want to bloom from that? What do we want to bloom from the tapestries that our stories have already created? Even the stories that are hard are stories that are prayers. And I fully believe that. There's this meme that's going around with this woman or person, whoever, dancing. And I think it says at the top, the ancestors asking who wants to volunteer to go down to earth to clean up all the karma. And it's like the volunteers, signing up before we really knew what was required of doing that work. And many of us receive that assignment of cleaning up the bloodline, and that assignment of this stops with me, right? Like this lineage, this pattern, this behavior, this expression, all of this stops with me. I'm creating something new. And that's the prayer.
Yeah.
That is a prayer. That's what a mandala is. It's a prayer for our future.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like when I feel into it, like what happened was I allowed myself to dematerialize.
Mm.
And I I think I waited for that because I thought the bard phase, the oracular phase was supposed to be about a success story or
Mhm.
about how I reached my potential or something, you know. I did have a song. It just wasn't the one that the summer me thought I was gonna have, But once I allowed myself to let it move through, I just immediately began to dematerialize and build this new pathway.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, you became the visionary, and like in the sense of like what once, like what is possible, asking that question, what is the potential, what is possible for this story, this life that I'm weaving, um beyond what I've imagined for myself already. And I think that's just so powerful to to take those like threshold memories and say, you know what, let me work with this. Let me explore with this material that's here. I bet this wants to become something that is beyond my wildest imagining.
Yeah. Yeah. And this feels so powerful too, because there's, I think, such a grief in this world that people think can't be creative unless they're like a quote unquote good singer or like a
Oh,
good writer. I'm sure you could go on and
yeah.
on on that one.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And this is a humaning right, is what it feels like, is it's a spell for humaning.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Yes.
I couldn't help, of course, but notice that you're in your Saturn return, or
Yes.
especially peaked last year. You may be like, oh, it's still peaking.
Oh yeah.
But
I feel
I'm
like the
curious.
worst is over though, to be honest. I hope.
Yeah. And then the years right before that, that was Saturn as your moon, which is also quite a threshold that one can go through.
Mhm.
I'm curious where you like personally feel yourself to be emerging, or what is your listening path um, speaking to you now as you've just moved some pretty important astrological shifts.
Yeah, I feel one of the big things I feel like is happening for me, which is kind of surprising for me, is like this illusion around um like a okay, I've got to be careful about how I say this. Don't cancel me, like please. But it's like this illusion around collectivism, and like, the future is collective, is starting to dissolve for me. And it's not that I'm not believing in it. It's just the way that I'm engaging my own creative process and leadership is not um, dependent on other people joining me. And that feels really vulnerable to step into. Um, and then like also getting the clear instructions from my guides to detox from collaborations for a while, and to not say yes to things, that involve me hoping that, you know, this like beautiful, big, robust village bursts forth from the creation. It's just like there's just like this illusion around that that's just sort of dissolving away. And I feel like I'm just trusting my own ideas a lot more these days, and not hoping that someone will come and save me from the task of showing up to my own leadership and the call on my life to steward, um steward a temple, steward my home, steward my creative process, and to be my own point person. um yeah, and I feel like that is a challenge, that saying that is a challenge to share out loud and be seen in, and maybe a challenge for people who are like, the future is interrelated. And I fully believe that. I believe that at a systems level, we are all interrelated. We have to be. But there's a level of like individuation that I feel like this season is calling me into, that I've never really allowed myself to have before in the past. Thought, oh, that's kind of egoic of me to want, you know, to build an X, Y, and Z. You know, it's not that I don't want to build an empire. I don't want to be the one on top necessarily. But the invitation and the assignment is to be willing to be. And that's really challenging for me. But I'm also stepping into it because I don't want to get dragged again. Every time I resist the invitation from spirit, the call of my life, I get dragged a little bit. So I'm just kind of going with it and seeing what is here on this path with that information.
Fucking yes. I am so on board.
Mm,
Thank you.
it's
I
kind
see
of,
it for you.
it feels kind of scandalous, to be honest. Like it just feels like, are we sure? Like, aren't we supposed to be, you know? And they're like, no,
Yeah, when
you make that up.
it's like that's the signal, like should be supposed to be, right? That like you're not fully like on it.
Hmm.
Ugh.
Yeah, this is like the first time in years that I haven't been trying to like bring collaborators and, you know, into my vision, or pay a bunch of, you know, other teachers to guest teach inside of my programs. And like it's kind of like it's I really want to say, to keep the status quo, that it's unnerving, but it's not. It's like really refreshing. I feel like I have permission to be more innovative, which is probably what my Aquarian moon really wants right now, is like permission to have ideas and to write into ideas that maybe are kind of emergent for people and emergent for me, you know, and to protect that a little bit for a while it's incubating.
Mm. Thank you for sharing yourself. I it's also true that that's what's emerging now, and right, like there could be what might emerge after this period might be this beautiful fountain of collaborations.
Mhm.
Like,
Maybe after the nodes shift, the
yeah.
North Node is not in Aries. Maybe that'll be it. I don't know. But yeah.
I feel like for myself, I'll just say that I feel like I'm a more um I like myself more as a collaborator when I also love myself as a um single creator, and
Mhm.
both ways. So wishing you all the best. Tell listeners, because I know there are going to be so many people wanting to keep going with you, having experienced your voice if they don't know you yet. how, like, what's coming up? How can people connect with you, go deeper with you, receive with you?
Yeah, well, you can follow along on Instagram at the Story Doula. It's where I share a lot of writing and musings. I share a lot of writing in my stories, even though you're supposed to show pictures of your life. I get really deep in there. And yeah, I think that's honestly the best way to kind of keep up with what is happening in the world of Storywork Studio and the things I'm up to.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story and letting us talk about your beautiful mandala.
Absolutely.
Mandala.
Oh,
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
How about that? Thank you. Thank you, Daje, for sharing your voice, for sharing yourself, for sharing your wisdom with me and with the community around Moon to Moon. I so appreciate your spirit in the world, your creative insights, your compelling, catalyzing, and healing words. Inviting listeners to connect with Daje, especially if you receive this by or on March 9th, you can hop on into Daje's workshop, Wild Vision, and inviting you to follow Daje on Instagram and just overall get connected to whatever Daje's up to, because Daje is a force. And this is the kind of force that nourishes. So thank you for your work in the world, Daje. I'm so excited to know you and to continue witnessing, celebrating, and learning with and from you. Thanks, everyone. I hope you're having a great week. I hope you'll go check out my astrology podcast episode once it's out, sometime here in the first half of March. Sending everyone lots and lots of love as the new moon in Pisces approaches. Take care, take care, take care. Thank you.